Okay. Assalamualaikum, good morning semua ya. Selamat berjumpa lagi lah. Saya take over khusus ni, kod ni daripada Madam Nadia. Dan saya difahamkan kamu dah cover chapter 1, 2 dan dah masuk chapter 3, tapi saya difahamkan hanya di slide nombor 11. Ya, itu yang saya dimaklumkan oleh Madam Nadia lah. Dan saya harap kamu pun dah ada dia punya material. Ya. Seingat saya dulu mengajar kod lama ya. ISP ni 550 is Information System Engineering. I teach the code, old code, ITS 572 for quite some time. Now, lepas tu dah lama tinggal, ambil kod baru, kod ni tinggal. Now I take over again the code with ISP550 lah, with the new code for program CS 264. Kod lama tu adalah untuk CS 244. Saya juga difahamkan bahawa kamu telah diberi scheme of work dan kamu juga telah distribute project assessment. Group project pun semua dah ada kan? Saya difahamkan semua dah ada group project. Dan saya juga difahamkan yang kamu ada diberikan perancangan untuk milestone berkaitan dengan project assessment ni. Untuk kamu submit. Saya ada milestone lah. Checkpoint, kita panggil checkpoint lah. Kamu panggil checkpoint. Bukan milestone, checkpoint. Yang mana checkpoint 1 ni sepatutnya hantar about 2.5% 2.5% daripada hasil proposal kamu. So, untuk kelas kita hari ni, saya pindahkan ke hari Isnin sebab of course lah saya clash. Hari Rabu pun saya ada kuliah. So, hari Isnin pukul 8 kita ada lecture dan juga tutorial kita maintain hari Khamis petang, 2.30. Sebab tak clash dengan saya, so saya maintain lah jadual itu. So, untuk minggu ni, sepatutnya kamu submit checkpoint 1. Tapi kita ada cuti perayaan Deepavali. So, saya bawa ke minggu depan lah. Saya bawa ke minggu depan. Untuk checkpoint 1, saya akan sediakan link. Madam Nadia ada bagi link tak?
Untuk checkpoint tak ada, Madam.
Okay. Kalau macam tu, saya akan sediakan link untuk kamu hantar by Monday next week lah. Before Monday. By Monday lah, I would say by Monday. Because we have our lecture by Monday. So that is for checkpoint number 1. Okay, and as for today, kita ni sekarang di week 4. Supposedly masuk chapter 4. Sebab untuk course ni chapter banyak Dulu lagi banyak kerja dengan makmal dia, apa semua. Course ni memang, seingat saya memang banyak lah. Tapi sebabkan ODL ni, kita ada 4 assessment, iaitu 1 test, 20 markah, project proposal, 20 markah, 20%, project proposal pun 20%, dan prototype development 20%. Dan final exam kita ada 40%. Alright. Okay. Alright, so hari ni sebab Madam Nadia kata sampai slide ke-11 So saya will continue with chapter 3 lah. And we'll do some refreshment on the topic 3. Itu system development approach, and methodology, which is software processes. Saya faham kamu dah ambil kursus masa part 2, kamu dah ambil kursus ISP550, betul tak? ISP450 itu berkaitan dengan IS Application and Development. Betul kan? Kita ingat dah.
ISP451 ada.
451, sorry. ICT450 ya. ISP451 yang mana kamu belajar tentang IS Application and Development, betul tak? Yang mana dalam kursus itu kamu belajar tentang data flow diagram dan juga ERD. So kenapa saya nak reflect back? Sebab you gotta learn another type of system modeling dalam pembangunan sistem. Yang kita nak belajar ni pun ia berkaitan dengan system development, IS development. Masa part tu kamu belajar ISP451, you learn about ERD and DFD. It's another method, it's another methodology, or we call it approaches. On semester 3, kamu belajar tentang business process management, yang mana is another approach, tetapi dia lebih kepada enterprise kind of system development. Tujuan dia actually untuk enterprise kind of information system development. And ISP 550 secara prinsipalnya dia berada di bawah software engineering kind of knowledge. Tapi kita sebab bidang kita ni, kita belajar tentang IS system development. So kita adapt many knowledge from software engineering. So IS engineering and software engineering from my point of view is actually overlap. So maksudnya kamu boleh menggunakan rujukan software engineering. Kalau dulu untuk ISE ni, kita guna buku sama dengan software engineering, iaitu Ian Somerville. Tapi untuk ISP 550 tu kod lama pun, untuk ITS 572, buku rujukan kita ialah Ian Somerville, which is software engineering. Tapi dekat sini saya tak pasti. Saya tengok slide dia dah kemas lah. So, dan saya tengok ada banyak sikit. Maksudnya bukan Ian Somerville saja digunakan untuk sebagai rujukan utama untuk slide dalam ISE ni. Okay. So as for today, untuk topik ISE ni, first things first, kamu kena reflect kod-kod yang pernah kamu belajar, sebab untuk IS development, kamu boleh menggunakan beberapa kaedah, beberapa kaedah yang mengikut developer tu bersesuaian untuk IS development tersebut. Ini termasuklah dari segi the scope of the problem, identification of the problem, the scope of the problem, the role that engage with the problem, how you going to do the analysis process untuk modeling. Kamu nak menggunakan traditional approach yang mana kamu belajar macam di ISP 451, ataupun kamu boleh menggunakan kaedah yang baru. Kaedah satu lagi which is kita akan belajar dalam kursus ISE ni, iaitu object oriented punya approach. So, and then masa ISP 451 pun kamu belajar tentang SDLC kan, System Development Life Cycle, yang mana kamu belajar tentang waterfall, spiral, prototype, mungkin agile pun ada. So this kind of methodologies kita akan tengok juga sedikit dalam kod ISE ini juga. So it's just to refresh your mind lah basically for the first 11 slides for this topic. So we covered the topic which is of course SDLC. This is masa ISP 451 pun kamu dah dengar kan SDLC ni kan. So pada saya, pada peringkat sekarang ni, term itu bukanlah alien untuk kamu. Maksudnya kamu dah dengar the term SDLC ni banyak kali. Bukan pertama kali lah maksud saya. And then apakah, which are the activities involved for each phases in the SDLC. And the term, we're going to look on what is methodology, model, tools, and techniques. And also, we also look at the approaches to system development, and the most current practice yang kita pakai untuk system development ialah agile development. So you can look at the perspective, different perspective dalam IS development. Okay, so the term SDLC, this is not the current first time you hear it, tapi at this age in 2021, this term has become traditional system. Why? Because zaman 60-an, 70-an, these approaches memang digunakan pada peringkat itu. Now we have developed new approaches and new kind of a way or perspective for SDLC. So kita akan lihat apa yang dikatakan sebagai traditional system approach and another one, object oriented, atau panggil object kind of approach. So the term yang dia pakai ada juga predictive and adaptive. Prediktif tu ada term yang kita merujuk pada metodologi dalam SDLC, apakah yang dimaksudkan sebagai prediktif dan apakah yang dimaksudkan sebagai adaptive. Okay. And then you should be able to describe, explain the differences between the definitions of methodology, model, tool, techniques, and so on and so forth. Okay. And then you dah start introduce dengan agile development kind of approach. Tapi saya tengok dalam ni metodologi untuk agile dia tak, ada. Kita tengok ya. Alright, so kita masuk dekat the first topic, iaitu SDLC, System Development Life Cycle. SDLC, as you know, kita ada fasa-fasa dia. So fasa-fasa tu pelaksanaan dia terbahagi kepada dua generic approach, two generic approach, which is number one, predictive, and number two, adaptive. Okay. So apa yang dikatakan tentang these general approaches on implementations of SDLC is basically how the activity inside the phases are conducted. Bagaimana aktiviti itu dijalankan. Yeah. So sama ada pertamanya predictive approach ni kita akan aktiviti dalam phases in SDLC ni, it is executed sequentially, secara sequence. Yeah. While adaptive, kita bangunkan secara aktiviti yang ada dalam fasa-fasa SDLC ni, aktivitinya dilaksanakan secara iteratif. Yeah. Alright, so that is basically dia punya meaning. So dia kata predictive approach ni, sebab apa dia kata prediktif? Sebab dia bersequence. Bersequence ni maksudnya step 1 kena buat dulu, lengkap, baru kita boleh laksanakan fasa kedua atau the next steps. And then fasa kedua siap, baru kita boleh run, kita boleh mula dengan fasa ketiga. So that is the sequential. So that's why we call it predictive. Maksudnya fasa 1 kita bangunkan, kita laksanakan lengkap, dan baru kita start with the second phase tu, then we know we can predict what's happen next. Where maksud dekat sini predictive approach, salah satu model yang lazim ialah waterfall model lah, it's a generic model yang mana the project can be planned in advance and that the information system can be developed according to the plan. So the requirements are well understood, dan dia punya level of risk is considered as low tech risk. So project-project yang falls under this category, low technical risk, you can use this predictive approach. Even though it's considered traditional, it doesn't mean that you cannot use it. Cuma waterfall model ni dia punya kekangan dia ialah untuk projek yang lama, proses development yang lama tu, maksudnya tempoh pembangunan yang lama, maka waterfall model boleh dianggap sesuai. Kalau short term, waterfall model mungkin tidak sesuai. So kesesuaian sesuatu sistem development tu kita merujuk kepada the plan, the budget, the timeline, the outcome, the complexity of the problem yang nak solve. Sometimes it can be not the complexity tu, maksudnya mungkin ada banyak role of user from different structure involved. Then probably waterfall lebih sesuai sebab dia timeline yang lama, dia memerlukan timeline yang lama sebab dia sequence. Kalau tempoh yang pendek mungkin tidak bersesuaian. Adaptive approach dia lebih kepada iteratif, contohnya prototyping, spiral model. So yang mana dia punya nature of the system development dia lebih flexible dan more adaptive to changes. So untuk prototyping ke spiral ke, the requirements and needs are uncertain or semi-certain. Somewhat you know but somewhat you don't know. It's uncertain, semi-certain. Dan juga dia dalam keadaan medium or high risk. Kita akan guna spiral bila di high risk. Spiral definitely cater for high complexity and high risk technical system development. Kalau prototyping, like for example, throw away prototyping, evolutional prototyping, dan dia akan falls under the medium technical risk. So basically these are the balance, the continuums on how we select a good SDLC approach. So siapa yang nak kena fikir ni, bagaimana proses pemilihannya. So kita bukan just terus pilih So we have few meetings, we talk about the plans, we talk about the budget, we talk about the size of developers involved, we talk about the size of the scope of the project that involves, and after we look at that, after we've done that process, then kita select which are the appropriate approach that we can use for the system development. Okay, so you need to somehow juggle on the decision making on how to look at the nature of the system yang kita nak bangunkan tu, dan baru kita pilih the methodology. Okay. Alright, ada soalan ke setakat ni? Kalau tak ada, saya teruskan ya. Alright. So the predictive SDLC, dia falls under traditional approaches. Okay. So the traditional approaches, macam saya kata tadi, is sequential phases, which is antara yang awal lah ya. This approach antara yang awal. So phases are related groups of developing activities, termasuk planning, analysis, design, implementation and deployment. Okay. So antaranya salah satu yang paling famous is waterfall model. Okay. So maksud sequential ni ialah dia tak ada overlap. Dia tak ada overlap dan dia tak ada iteration. Satu aktiviti mesti dihabiskan lengkap baru aktiviti lain bermula. Dan sebenarnya dalam fasa transition antara satu fasa ke fasa lain, dia heavily documented approaches. Okay. Dia heavily documented. Mungkin dia tak letak kat sini, dia heavily documented approaches. So banyaklah dokumen yang kita kena sediakan. So that's why when you have a longer time to prepare, then this approach is suitable. Okay. So one phase is completed, you fall over the waterfall to the next phase. Maksudnya there's no going back. Kalau you nak go back pun, it's only for quality checking and auditing. Not 100%. It's just about few percent just for quality checking. Then yes. But most of the activity, there's no going back. Because it will affect the planning and budgeting and time as well. So tu dia punya some sort of disadvantage lah. Kalau traditional predictive SDLC waterfall ni, iteration dia punya fasa-fasa tu basically sama. Yeah. So antara project initiation and planning, so dia ada specification dia. So dia kena prepare documentation. And then from project planning ke analysis pun dia ada specification dia. That's why kita pakai the term, kalau you refer kepada buku software engineering, they have the term requirements and specifications. So basically, requirements and specification is a document that you capture what are the important factors atau contohnya functions, data, descriptions of the data that you're going to use dalam sistem pembangunan tu. Okay, so there's no going back. That's why dia panggil waterfall, tapi waterfall pun dia ada go up back kan. That's why kalau dia nak pergi patah balik pun dia only for quality checking. Okay, so this is the phases, you can read it. Yeah. Planning, apa aktiviti dia. We look at the suitability of the system to be developed in terms of time, money and budget and scope. Scope including the users and the complexity of the system. And then we have the analysis, understand and document all details of business needs and requirements of the system. And then the design, you start do the modeling and transfer the modeling into some sort of more physical and logical punya kind of perspective before the implementation. During the implementation, you have to do the coding, do the testing. So you have to plan for the test plan, and then you do the testing, and then you start migrating the system after the testing and install and also gives training. Then you go to the deployment and maintenance. Okay. Alright, ini is another activity yang it will describe dalam fasa-fasa tersebut. Yeah. So you boleh look at it. Basically samalah. Define the problem in planning, gather information. Gather information ni termasuk macam-macam jenis lagi lah teknik yang kita boleh guna ya. Contoh document observation, physical observation, survey, apa lagi? Interviews, okay. Then baru you define the system requirement. Interviews pun you have to sebab chapter 2 you dah belajar tentang stakeholders kan, the internal user, the external user. So you have to interviews has wide, paling wide user punya interview, whether it's back end or front end. Yeah. Basically front end lah. Yeah. Kalau back end tu mungkin dari segi, if we want to look at the complexity tu, staff bahagian role, contohnya macam profit, sale kan. Sales from the customer side and the management side. Okay. Then you start build the requirement for the prototypes and then you prioritize the requirement. Prioritize requirement tu you kena reflect balik pada scope lah. Then the budget and also the timeline. So this process require a lot of discussion, a lot of meeting with the owner of the system and the user of the system. So system developer tak boleh decide seorang-seorang on this prioritize of requirement. Yeah. And then we go to the design activities. Now this kalau traditional dia tak boleh iteratif lah, dia sequence. Okay. So if you look at this, paling akhir sekali is support activity, tapi dalam ISP kita just teori sajalah support activity ni ya. Iaitu the maintenance of the system. So support phases only bermula sekira proses implementation, integration and training tu telah berlangsung. Telah dibuat lah. So dia dalam fasa maintenance while the system is actually running. Okay. So predictive SDLC typically include support has project phase. Adaptive SDLC treat support has separate project. Tu perbezaan dia. Kalau prediktif, dia termasuk dalam fasa projek. Tapi adaptif dia dah boleh subcon kepada projek lain. So orang yang develop tu dia dah boleh start another project. And then probably the cost is going to be less. Kalau prediktif, cost maintenance tu pun dia akan included dalam cost development. And costing untuk development, nanti kamu belajar IT investment, nanti you tengoklah ya. Masa IT investment, cost untuk development dengan maintenance slightly different. Usually kita pakai dalam maintenance paling besar is the biggest cost for maintenance kita kena allocate. So that's why kalau kita subcon ataupun separate that fasa maintenance phase to has a different project, so we only cater the development cost. So ada pro and cons dia. Pro and cons dia. Dan bergantung pada situation. Contohnya kalau sistem tu highly complex and kita nak pakai in the long run, then you can go to predictive SDLC. But if the project sebab kita tahu kan IT ni dia punya dia punya changeability tu sangat kerap kan. Maybe adaptive SDLC ni lagi bagus. Sebab mungkin kita nak new technology come in, new version of the system. A new technology like come in, kita nak kena upgrade system. So that's why separate project would look as better budget. Alright, so support activity termasuk maintenance of the system, enhancing and supporting. Salah satu job spec yang ada dekat industri pun ialah bahagian maintenance selain daripada development. So kalau kamu kerja besok selalunya kita sebagai bila dah masuk start alam pekerjaan, most of the students are engaged in job dia dalam development. Tapi after some time like most of my friend in the industry dah pening buat development, dia akan masuk ke dalam maintenance. Maintenance pun pening juga sebab you deal with the customer. You deal with the end user. Customer. Dia end user pun pening juga So kalau ada technical error pun they have to engage on how to fix the technical error. So all in all, tapi the nature of work probably some kind of a different kind of scope. So kalau dah bosan dekat development, you can move to the technical testing. Maintenance. Alright. So that is on the SDLC phases. Now we move to agile model. Agile is more current. It's more current. Yang mana dia mengambil pendekatan to be less document usage, mengurangkan penggunaan dokumen. Sebab kalau waterfall tu antara fasa ke fasa kita akan keluarkan document and requirement and specification documents. So sebab apa dia sebagai satu kaedah rujukan, reference for the developers. Agile model is more trying to solve the problem quickly by using the technical approach. So documentation tu mungkin setakat to support the planning, the timeline of the development. So kita tengok fasa dia pun lebih kurang sama je sebenarnya. The requirement, design, development, testing, deployments and review. Tapi mungkin agile ni, the maintenance kita dah boleh bagi dekat different project lah, different budget or different company to manage the maintenance. So this is adaptive SDLC. Tadi kita belajar tentang sequential. Now kita belajar tentang iterative. Adaptive approach is more iterative. We mean the definition ni ialah adaptive approach. We mean a development approach in which project activities including plan and models are adjusted as the project progress. So salah satu contohnya yang for complex high risk technical development, kita akan pakai spiral model. Spiral model ni pun digunakan sekiranya dia overlap industry. So spiral model is an adaptive type SDLC that cycles over and over again. The fasa tu kita akan endure over and over again. But the activity is somewhat more extensive lah on each of the iteration until the project complete. Okay. So prototype is a preliminary working model showing some aspect of a larger system. So prototypes, there ada several types of prototype juga. So agile tu adalah is daripada ni jugalah prototype kind of methodology. Yang mana prototype ni kita boleh guna throw away dan kita upgrade ataupun evolutionary prototype. We keep the original version but kita improve and improve from that original version until kita satisfy with the version and we run the prototype as actual system. Alright. Maksud dia iteration ni you akan melalui fasa tu again and again until you reach a satisfactory satisfactory punya version. Alright, so you can see here spiral uses the term iteration to divide a very large complex problem into smaller, more easily managed when it's breaking down into smaller version tu, so dia boleh manage lebih bagus pada smaller version. So each small problem is solved until the large problem is solved. So eventually from smaller version solution, it contributed to a larger problem solution because of the breaking down of the activity. So iteration is a system development process in which work activities such as the phases, analysis, design, implementation are done in once, then again and yet again on different system components. So that's why you have to have clear the system components too. They are repeated until the system is closer to what is ultimately needed. So ultimately needed too is actually the one that you want to achieve. So that is during initiations and planning of the system. Tadi kita tengok on sequential and then iterative, and now we have incremental development. So this is an additional adaptive concept where the incremental development is an approach that completes portions of the system in increments. Complete portions meaning they are breaking down the portions into subsystem and gradually increase the portions of the development of the information system. A system is implemented and partially deployed in step during the project. Once some portions dah siap, then they move to the next phases, and then the next phase portions is added up, and then the next portions is added up until added up and deployed until it completes. So getting parts of working system into user hence sooner. So you can gradually develop the system and deploy and run the system terus. So these three types of development, dia ada pro and cons lah. Dari segi time, dari segi budget, dari segi manpower, dari segi scope. Okay. Alright. So what is the name of walking skeleton ni? Walking skeleton is an approach in which the complete system structure is built early, but with bare bones functionality. So it's only for limited kind of it's really I would call it basic lah, really basic. It's bare bone functionality, only what is important. Soalnya kalau kita nak buat functionality yang function yang agak kompleks kan, ataupun complicated, yeah. By now you should understand what is complicated and what is complex. Complicated ni when you have a lot of formulations that you want to make sure that it is correct and accurate, then you can use this bare bones functionality. Kalau formulation tu salah, your algo lah, basically algorithm tu tak betul, because algorithm we use has a logic to the formulation kan. So you want to test it first, then you can use the walking skeleton kind of approach to make sure that the formulation is correct and accurate. Yeah? Not just correct but accurate. Alright. Ada soalan ke sampai setakat ni?
Tak ada, madam.
Alright, thank you Farizal. Okay, next subtopic ialah bahagian methodology, model, tools and techniques. Okay, so basically methodology is the bigger guidelines. The bigger guidelines when you have a systematic kind of activity yang kita follow. So methodologies is a system development that provide guidelines to follow for completing every activity in the system development life cycle, including specific models, tools and techniques. So it's bigger guidelines. Okay. So what to do, when, why and how. That is in methodology. Specify and then methodology ni kita refer juga basically dari segi approach dia yang kita pakai. Sebab nanti costing, budgeting, dia akan reflect to this methodology that we use. So it's also specified the SDLC with the activities and tasks. By now you can also differentiate what's the meaning of activities and tasks. And it's also specify the project planning and management. It includes models and reporting type. It also specify analysis and design models to create. So kalau sequential, definitely traditional approach. Sequentials, you have to have a certain models yang you pakai. Kalau kamu pakai object approach yang kita nak belajar sekarang, you have to apply a certain models. Certain models, they don't crisscross. They follow according to the nature of the methodology. Okay. They also specify testing, implementation and testing, and also deployment and support techniques. So another term that we use that refer to this methodology ialah system development process. Okay. Alright. Selecting the appropriate methodology. How we're gonna choose the appropriate methodology. And first, antaranya ialah we need to check on how well we depend on user requirement. Berapa banyak kita bergantung requirements yang datang daripada user. Ataupun requirements yang tak semestinya perlu datang daripada user, tetapi dia perlu datang daripada the technical people. So, kalau macam you nak buat terowong bawah tanah kan, You tak refer banyak requirement on user kan. You tak interview contohnya terowong bawah tanah untuk jalan raya kan. You tak tanya orang pengguna driver. Okay. So definitely you terus pergi kepada technicality dari segi tanah, struktur struktur gunung ataupun bukit tu. So you have to go to jabatan cari gali, mechanical, civil, engineering, pengangkutan, macam-macam lah kan. So it's cross. Tapi kalau macam kita nak buat e-commerce, management information system, definitely kita highly require, we need to get the requirement from user. Then that's what are the appropriate methodology to use with that kind of activity. Terutamanya nak dapatkan requirement and specification. Okay. So satu lagi on familiarity with technology, system complexity, system reliability, time schedule. Yeah. Time schedule, long, short or intermediate, schedule, visibility. So these are all the factors yang kita consider. Ada lagi lah sebenarnya, costing, budgeting, tapi cukuplah setakat ni dulu. These are the factors yang kita fikir untuk selecting the appropriate methodology. The clarity of user requirement, kita boleh guna RAD or Agile yang more suitable when user requirements are unclear. Tapi Agile ni pun hanya untuk sistem, kalau sistem kompleks macam tu kita tak pakai Agile, kita macam terowong tadi tu contohnya. So RAD, Rapid Application Design ni, Rapid Application Development and Agile ni, we can use for requirement when the requirement are unclear. So familiarity with technology, throw away prototyping. Saya tak pasti next ada lagi ke reference pasal throw away. Tadi saya sebut pasal throw away prototyping, tapi dalam slide ni dia tak mention. So you have to do an extra reading lah. What does it mean by throw away prototyping? Satu lagi, evolutionary prototyping. And prototyping is the initial motivation for Agile. Yeah. So kalau you dah familiar with the technology, maka these types of appropriate methodology sesuai lah untuk pembangunan, yang dipilih untuk pembangunan sistem. And of course it's not traditional. Kalau sistem tu besar, contohnya sistem untuk jabatan kementerian ke apa ke, then waterfall mungkin sesuai. Okay. System complexity, Agile with good project management techniques or throw away prototyping. Throw away evolutionary, dia lebih kurang lah, nak kata lebih kurang tu tidak dapat. It's a prototyping type. And then we have system reliability, for iterative and incremental lebih sesuai. Agile pun sesuai. Sebab apa? Dia close, masuk dekat sini system reliability ni, if you want to, the development is highly engaged with the user requirement. And user also being engaged during the development quite extensively. Okay. And then for short time schedule, RAD and Agile. And then for schedule visibility, banyak guna Agile. Alright, so ini dah masuk sikit Agile methods in principle. So Agile, the principle for Agile dia ada dalam 5. The customer involvement, incremental delivery. People, they're more engaged on people, not process. Different perspective. Kalau tak, kita selalu fikir on the process and look at the role of the people in the process. Yeah. And then embrace change. Maintain system simplicity. So customer involvement, customers are closely involved throughout the development process. Their role is to provide and prioritize new system requirements and to evaluate the iterations of the system. So setiap fasa tu customer ataupun user di-engagekan untuk requirements dan juga to evaluate what's are the suitability of that system development during that phase. And then incremental delivery, the software is developed in increments with the customer specifying the requirement to be included in each increment. So user tu di-involvekan dekat setiap incremental delivery. And then people not process. The skill of the development team should be recognized and exploit. Maksudnya dekat sini programmer tu kena extensive, good and highly skilled in programming. Okay. And then less monitoring lah maksudnya. Less monitoring. Maksudnya you give the task to your programmer and you trust them to do it and you expect them to get the outcome as what you wanted. Team members should be left to develop their own ways of working without prescriptive processes. Maksudnya you give them on their own how they deliver programming dia tu tanpa perlu banyak documentation that follows. And then embrace change. Agile is meant for change, tapi that changes tu bukanlah maksudnya lari daripada apa yang requirement lah. Expect the system requirement to change and so design the system to accommodate these changes. And these changes kalau dalam waterfall dia mesti ada version dia, document version dia. Changes pertama ada document dia. Tapi kalau dalam agile dia less in that sense. Dia open to changes with very less of documentation. Kalau waterfall version ni pun dia document kan. So kita ada banyak reference on version 1, version 2, version 2A because some portions dalam sistem tu yang berubah, yang lain tak berubah, contohnya macam tu lah. Okay. And then agile focus on functionality. The functionality of the system. Alright. Okay, so methodology ni dia dah bagi tahu apa teknik dia, model dia dan tools. Okay. Tapi apa itu models, tools and techniques? So model is an abstraction of important aspects of the real world. It makes us understand a complex concept. So that's why we cakap you buat modeling, buat DFD, buat ERD is actually the representation on what's happened in the system. That shows how the system works in most simple, understandable way. So it's also part of communication between what's going on in the system and how we understand it as a human being. Okay, in IS, some models are system components. So when we talk about system component, you always look at the model. Contohnya, the component model, the system component model. System component model adalah salah satu model dalam yang perlu dihasilkan dalam system development. ERD is also a system component. Why? Because dalam ERD kita reflects the entity, apa entity dia, apa processes dia, apa data component dia and all. Okay. So some models are used to manage the development process. Okay. So models yang kita rujuk dekat sini, definitely the flowchart is also used as a model. DFD, ERD, structured chart, use case diagram, class diagram, sequence diagram. So these are the models of yang kita refer sebagai models dalam methodology. That is referring kalau macam system component punya models tu dia reflected on each of the technical aspect, functionality, the structure of the system. Tapi dari segi management sistem tersebut, kita juga ada Gantt, organization hierarchy chart, dan kita ada juga beberapa models yang merujuk kepada non-technical aspect of the system development. So we have the component system components, and the management aspect of the system development. So that is what we. Another way models is you kena bangunkan lah, dan you dah pernah belajar lah. Like in terms kelas ni, you kena bangunkan use case, class diagram, sequence diagram, activity diagram. Alright. So reason for modeling is basically we want to learn from the process, the modeling process. Bila kita hasilkan modeling, dia bukan you buat sekali terus diterima. There always a phase of refinement. And then each of this refinement tu kena through sama ada presentation pada team member ataupun user ataupun owner. So it's very extensive activity lah. So we want to reduce complexity by doing that abstractions of modeling. Okay. So we want to make clear that what's the steps we needed, the data needed, the process involved, the accuracy, the flexibility, the reliability of the system is clear. Remembering all of the details, it's important as well. Kalau berubah team developers ni selalunya kita by contract kan, banyak IT job ni by contract kan, because it's by project. So we also need some sort of reference in the future that maybe we have similar project but with different owner. So we can replicate that based on the details and experience that they have. Okay. It's also part as communication among team members and also among owners or stakeholders, a variety of users and stakeholders. And it's of course reference that used for maintenance and enhancement in the future. Alright, and next, what else? So, tools. Now we go to tools. Tools is basically the software. Senang cerita, the software, the application, that is the tools. Okay. Nak buat Gantt chart, kita pakai project management, Microsoft Project untuk Gantt chart. Untuk buat SDLC, untuk buat DFD, kau pakai apa sebelum ni? Untuk buat ERD, kau pakai apa sebelum ni? Dia ada tools, ada yang interactive tools, ada yang non-interactive tools. As long as you document it, you creating it, you drawing it. You kalau nak buat DFD pakai Microsoft Word pun boleh kan? Tapi leceh sikit lah, mungkin tak berapa interaktif. Contohnya lah. So dia ada banyak tools. Antaranya yang license or non-license tool. Okay. So macam-macam jenis tool lah. Contohnya ditunjuk kat sini, visual modeling tools. Tools that help the analyst to create and verify important system models, often generating program code. Selalunya bila kita buat DFD, siapa yang pakai Rational Rows? Rational Rows is a tools yang mana it's good, it's also manage the system, modeling, and from modeling, they derive the basic coding, the structure of the coding for the implementation phase. Okay. IDE, yang tools untuk buat DFD, paling bagus kita guna integrated development environment lah, IDE tools. That helps programmers with variety of programming tasks. Ataupun kamu guna software apa yang untuk bangunkan software pun, practice also, as long as you ada environment dalam tools tersebut untuk bangunkan, untuk design you punya system. Then yes, it's called IDE. Okay. Last kali, techniques. Kalau tadi methodology is a bigger guideline, techniques is a collection of guidelines, yeah, that helps analysts complete a system development activity or task. Yeah. So the learning techniques is the key to having expertise in the field. So each techniques ni dia agak spesifik dengan bidang dalam field tersebut. Contohnya data modeling techniques. Kita belajar tentang data modeling technique, the traditional approach, the object approach, relational database design technique, structured programming technique. What does it mean by structured programming techniques? Yang kamu belajar ISP550 is considered structured C++. But what is object oriented? Adakah dia structured? Then dia bukan object oriented, is object programming technique, object oriented programming techniques. So it's very specific. Technique is very specific. Okay. Alright. Now we go into the next subtopic, which is ini pun dah lebih kurang sejam, tak sampai sejam lagi. Alright, kita ada soalan tak sebelum kita masuk ke next subtopics? Kalau tak ada, nanti you can post dekat dalam group lah kalau ada soalan, ya. And then kita continue with the two approaches to system development. There are two approaches. Number one is the traditional approach, and number two, the object-oriented approach. So we go to the traditional approach. These are considered the earlier approach. The traditional approach includes many variations based on techniques used to develop information system with structured and modular programming. Often referred as structured system development. There are three techniques that make up the structured approach: the structured analysis, structured design, and structured programming techniques. So the structured programming, basically yang dikatakan structured tu bila kita belajar tentang sequence, selections and repetition. Benda tu pun ada juga dekat object oriented, tapi approach dia berbeza. Okay. Yang mana ones have beginning and ones as ending. So that's why kita belajar dalam ISP550, kita belajar how to do the logic using flowchart, kan. So this is structured programming, where we have the steps, based on the sequence. Ni stand up, turn right, walk, ataupun kita ada decision dan juga kita ada iteration, go back. Dan kita juga ada branching sebenarnya. Branching yang mana is as a branching is a complex approach to decision making. Yang mana kita ada a loop in a loop. Sebab kalau kita nak buat multi-decision, definitely kita guna that kind of approach. Kalau modular programming pula, we have some sort of a bit of, kita ada konsep hierarchy. Hierarchy. Kita ada upper class, kita ada lower class. Kita ada root and kita ada child. So that is modular programming, where you have a basic what we call it, basic, kita ada apa term tu lah, lama kita tinggal program lama main event tu being called to the next module or function events. Yang mana setiap modul tu ada dia punya functionality and task yang kita assign untuk dia execute. Okay, okay, macam you pakai you ada hierarchy. So you have hierarchy tu refer kepada levels of complexity yang ada. Okay. So kalau this is basic, why we can only have 2 level, the root kita panggil level 0 kan, the first level child kita panggil level 1, and it reflects kalau lagi banyak level maka di consider lagi complex. Then probably the module mungkin boleh jadi lebih banyak because module 1 maybe have to call 3 other modules and module 2 have to call 2 other modules. Level 3 have to call 4 other modules. That is considered level 2. Ini salah satu approach. For structured design, so basically structured design ni kita breaking down basically macam hierarchy tadilah juga, dia breaking down the what we call it, the task supaya it become clear and specific. So basically it's a technique providing guidelines for deciding what the set of programs should be, what each program should accomplish, and how the program should be organized. So this is dalam bentuk structured design. Tapi kalau structured design dia lebih kepada flow, process flow. Dia lebih banyak kepada flow, data flow ke process flow ke function flow ke untuk structured approach. Structured analysis, contoh paling baik ialah DFD. DFD is structured analysis. Yang kamu belajar masa ISP550 tu is considered structured analysis. So analysis yang kita pakai dekat sini DFD. DFD ni pun dari segi complexity dia, yang selalu kita buat DFD level 0 Kita ada context diagram. Context diagram is one model. DFD is another model. Dalam DFD tu pun dia ada level 0, level 1, level 2. So level 1 tu basically on each process, bila kita dah masuk dekat dalam proses ni, dalam proses ni pun kita break it down the hierarchy to show the clear function on each of, contohnya schedule cost. Dalam schedule cost tu you boleh add, you boleh drop, you boleh change group, you boleh add credit hours contohnya. It break down into more. Then it become level 1. So contohnya dalam add credit hour, level 1 tu you break down, apply more than maximum. Apply more than maximum credit hour, you have a decision. So the decision tu reflects approvals, approve or reject. So it become level 2. Okay, so dia lagi details on each of that processes. Because that is how it will be documented. Okay? So kalau DFD is basically for process flow, ERD is for data flow. Okay? For data. How we going to save the data dalam untuk sistem tersebut dalam kita punya development. But ERD and DFD, dia mesti complement each other. You cannot buat DFD tanpa ERD. You mesti kena buat DFD bersama ERD. So dalam DFD kita ada data flow, right? So this data flow ni mesti align dengan ERD. Otherwise, it won't be meaningful. It won't be meaningful. Okay. Contoh yang dekat sini tak sama macam DFD tadi tu. So apa yang ada dalam data store dalam DFD, dia mesti reflect ke dalam ERD. Okay. So these are the structured approach lah Structured analysis, we look at the event, data flow diagrams, entity, ERD. Entity relationship diagram. Design kita ada structure chart. For example kat sini, structure programming, setiap modul tu, setiap komponen tu kita dah buat dia punya programming construct. So kita start coding lah. Coding tu kita pakai macam biasa lah. Contohnya apa ya? Sekarang ni web. Yang ni banyak system development kan. So if you use C++, it's considered structured. The next approach is the object-oriented approach. Now, object-oriented approach ni, the way we see things is totally different on how we see master structured approach. Master structured approach kita lebih tengok pada process flow, data flow. But object-oriented approach ni kita tengok lebih kepada behavior. Sesuatu objek. Behavior, what they can do. Daripada kita tengok tertibnya, kita lihat apa yang kita boleh buat. The behavior of the object. It's more current. Dia dalam awal mid 90-an lah. Sebab nak menyelesaikan the lackness dalam structured approach. We try to look at the different approach. Kalau tadi kita ada structured requirement, kita ada structured analysis, kita ada structured design, kita ada structured programming. Yang kamu belajar OOP ISP550 tu pun kamu dah start with OOP first. Tapi untuk analysis and design kita ada OOA dan juga OOD. Okay. So OOA ni object oriented analysis, defining all the types of project, all of the types of objects that do the work in the system and showing what use cases are required to complete the task. So dalam objek ni, behavior ni kita capture through use case. Use case. So satu diagram, use case diagram ni kita ada use cases. So nanti kamu kena buat lah yang ni dalam untuk course ni. OOD pula, Object Oriented Design, defining all of the types of objects necessary to communicate with people and devices in the system, showing how objects interact to complete the task, and refining the definitions of each types of object so it can be implemented with specific language or environment. Yang ni kamu dah start belajar sequence diagram ataupun activity diagram to show the movement and how it behave while running the system. OOP is writing statement, is the implementation, is writing the coding here. Writing the coding to define each types of object does. So you have to declare the object first and what they can use, including the message and the object that sent to each other. An object is a types of things, contohnya a customer or employee or a button or a menu. Kita dah tak boleh nak cakap, kita tak boleh nak equate object is entity. We cannot equate like that. Why? Because entities also can be captured as an event kan. But kat sini object ni, button pun we can say is an object because button can behave. There are things that they can do. So identifying types of objects mean classifying things. So class diagram is another diagram. Tadi kita ada use case diagram, sequence diagram. Class diagram is a graphical model used in the object-oriented approach to show classes of objects in the system. So classes of the objects kita show dalam bentuk class diagram. So class diagram ni core lah. Lepas kita buat use case diagram, the next diagram yang kita kena hasilkan ialah class diagram. Dan class diagram kamu kena mahir. Use case kena mahir, class diagram kena mahir, sequence diagram kena mahir dan juga activity diagram. Okay. Tapi bila kamu tengok activity diagram tu, kamu dah akan guna juga konsep yang kamu belajar dalam BPN workflow, yang mana dia ada swim lane activity diagram. So Nanti kita tengoklah dalam lab activity nanti ya. So many systems being developed today combine both traditional and object-oriented technology. Okay, so we should know the basic concept of each approach, but this coursework might emphasize on one approach over another. So dalam coursework ni kita akan fokus dekat object-oriented approach. Okay, sebab structured approach kamu dah cover masa ISP550 sebelum ni ya. Dan juga database juga kamu dah start extensive guna ERD kan, ISP550 tak silap saya. Alright, ada soalan tak? Cuma kita masuk on agile ni. You all okay? Dah nak ambil dah ni. 3 slide je lagi. Tak ada soalan saya teruskan lah. The agile development philosophy and agile modeling. This is our final subtopic lah. Yeah. So agile come from the word being agile lah, agility. Yeah, being able to change direction rapidly. And of course with rapid itu maksudnya with less documentations even in the middle of a project. So the keystones of agile development is agility, is being agility. Agile development is a philosophy and set guidelines for developing software in unknown, rapidly changing environment. So agile modeling is a philosophy about how to build models, some of which are formals and details, and others sketchy and minimal. So the document that refer kat sini ialah a minimal document and it's very sketchy. Meaning tak adalah standard format Kalau you nak buat kalau dalam structured development tadi, traditional approach structured approach, the user document dia ada standard dia. Yang kita ada software requirement specification, very extensive software requirement documentation. Okay, tapi for agile dia taking less on that. So basically untuk agile development methodology, kalau figure kat sini kita tengok extreme programming methodology. Meaning it's less document. Totally highly extensive on programming. Dan dia ada Scrum methodology. Yeah. You can use Scrum methodology ataupun UP methodology. But I'm not sure what is UP dia punya full dia. So, biasa dengar Scrum methodology. So, these are the methodology that we can use to build agile development and modeling for agile development information system. So, the philosophies and values, we have 4 for agile. Values responding to change over following a plan. Tapi sebenarnya tak boleh lari pada scope lah. Tak boleh lari pada scope. Kalau you change without into something totally new but doesn't solve your problem, it doesn't purposeful. So dalam mana-mana IS development, you mesti ada purpose. It must be purposeful. So it's flexible on changes but not devaluing the purpose of the development. So the development still kena tengok on dia punya purpose tak nanti kalau totally different without achieving the purpose of the development, there is no use. So value responding to change over following a plan. So plan tu maksudnya tak fix lah. It can change. Value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Dia kalau macam contohnya Scrum tu, dia punya system development untuk coding tu probably take about 14 days. Bila 14 days dah siap tempoh untuk programming, dia akan present. Dia akan tengok dari segi implementation, accurate ke tidak. Kalau other developers kata, okay, this is acceptable, we use it. So they use it. Kalau macam, so it only take 2 weeks for 14 days for example. Tapi kalau structure, it probably take about 6 months just for development. So they can cut short those tempoh untuk extensive coding tu, dia boleh cut short. Kalau structured, dia suka main that like minimum 6 months or 18 months. Selalunya project structured, it will be take 18 months or 24 months. 24 months. So dalam 24 months tu, kalau structured, dia fokus dekat coding probably 6 to 12 months. Padahal the same activity dia boleh cut short jadi just about nak kata 14 weeks or 14 days tu mungkin tak lah, tapi it become probably just 3 months for the coding. So that's why value of individual interactions to over processes tu dia akan engage juga kepada antara developers ataupun dengan users to check whether the changes is acceptable. The changes is according to what they want to achieve. And then value working software over comprehensive documentation. So dia banyak mempunyai extensive software yang banyak tools yang dia boleh automatically simpan the activity rather than documentation. Tak banyaklah nak kena refer documentation. Kadang-kadang kalau guna structured tu, dia punya documentation kalau pun nak bentuk soft copy pun banyak. Banyak. So banyaklah dia punya kompartmen pun banyak, dalam tu pun banyak. Pernahlah tengok pernahlah kita engage juga, tapi I think agile ni banyak dia punya advantage dari segi you don't have to spend a lot of time on preparing the documentation. Otherwise, you kena dedicate masa pula. The timeline tu jadi panjang sebab you have to dedicate, you kena allocate masa untuk dedicate completing the documentation. And then value customer collaboration, the fourth values is value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So customer engagement, it's very highly engaged dalam proses development. Kalau structured, customer engagement tu hanya pada peringkat requirement and analysis. Implementation, diorang tak kacau dah. Implementation fokus dekat developer saja. Tapi kalau agile ni, masa implementation pun dia engage dengan end user. Okay. And then ada berbanding dengan kontrak lah yang ada. So agile modeling is not about doing less modeling, but about doing the right kind of modeling at the right level of details for the right purposes. And it's shorter time. Even with the same flexibility, you can use agile to have shorter time. Okay, the basic principle of 8M is the attitude that developers should have as they develop software. Agile principle, develop software as your primary goal, enable the next effort as your secondary goal, minimize your modeling activity, few and simple, embrace the change. Few and simple ni maksudnya, but then the functionality is extensive. Embrace change and change incrementally, model with a purpose, build multiple models, build high quality models and get feedback rapidly, focus on content rather than representation, learn from each other with open communication, know your models and how to use them, adapt to specific project needs. So the practice, kita tak buat agile dalam syllabus ni, kita buat object oriented, tapi these are the practices: the iterative and incremental modeling, teamwork, simplicity, validation, documentation and motivation. So the summary, so we learn about two types of approaches, the predictive and adaptive. So the predictive is widely known or generally known as waterfall model. Adaptive is iterative. Use any iterative or iterations in requirements. It's used when the requirements are less certain and the project will need to react to changes. Alright. This stack uses an adaptive approach to the SDLC. This our activity. Kita akan lebih pada adaptive approach. We also learn about what is methodology, tools, techniques and models. And we also learn about the two approaches of modeling The two approaches to construct and modeling software, which is the traditional approach and object-oriented approach. Yang mana kita fokus dekat object-oriented approach. And we also learn a little bit on agile development, but we're not going to develop agile. Alright? So basically that's the summary of chapter 3. Any question?
Madam,
Yes.
nanti Madam akan post this video dekat GC kan?
Ya, saya akan
Okay.
dekat, saya tak buat GC apa tu, saya upload nanti di, saya akan, apa tu, nanti dia akan dapat, saya akan upload kat YouTube, saya bagi link.
Okay Madam, thank you.
Dia punya slide saya dah upload dekat, dia punya slide saya